Hello from Blue Willow Bookshop in Houston, Texas. I am Kathy Berner, the event coordinator at the shop. We are happy to host this virtual event celebrating Courtney K's new novel, In Case of Heartbreak. Courtney will appear in conversation with authors Chantel Gertan and Amy Spalding. I am so excited for this conversation, so please join me in welcoming everyone to the screen. Hi, how are y'all?
Good, how are you?
Good. Courtney, congratulations on the publication of your novel. It's so nice to see you again.
Thank
And
you.
Amy and Chantel, I'm so happy to have you both here as well.
This is so exciting. I'm so happy to celebrate Courtney.
Thank you for joining me.
I'm so excited to be part of this event and so happy to support Courtney, maybe the nicest person in this entire business.
Yeah, I'd hard agree on that one. So I'm going to ask some questions and then we'll take audience questions and then we'll wrap with one final signature Blue Willow question. And when I ask the question of all of you, I'll give you an order to answer in and I'll rotate it around so we can figure out how to navigate that as best as possible. So to start, can you each tell us briefly about your newest book, as well as what made you want to tell your main character's story to give them their HEA or HFN? And let's go Courtney, Amy, Chantel.
So in the case of Heartbreak is about our cinnamon roll of a baker, Ben Parrish, who on the cusp of committing to a international baking competition show has to deal with the fact that he actually has to go on live TV and be filmed and perceived, which he's not good at. And so we open with the book. He's struggling very much with recording. And to make matters worse, the producer of the show mistakes his long-term unrequited crush, Adam Reed, for his current boyfriend. And Adam very publicly says, we'll only ever just be friends. So Ben has a major meltdown, but thankfully is on his way to his grandmother's 2-week birthday extravaganza in Maywell Bay. But unbeknownst to Ben, Grandma has hired Adam to be the fill-in guitarist for the entire 2-week celebration and housed them in the cottage together. And the reason why I wanted to tell Ben's story is because he's just an anxious little being with a lot of childhood trauma who deserves his happily ever after. And writing his love story with Adam, who ended up being a cinnamon roll as well, was probably one of the most rewarding things I've done. Do you want me to call on the next? Popcorn, no. Amy.
Oh, that's what we're gonna start doing, popcorn. Amy.
All right. For consideration is my most recent book. It's about Nina Rice, who has gone through a toxic breakup a few years ago. So she's just like escaped into the suburbs. She's hiding. Her job is writing she's writing the emails that like celebrities send that are the clients of the talent agency she works for. So she's basically like ghostwriting as celebrities, but only boring emails that are like logistical things. So she gets called in because a control freak of a celebrity who is a up-and-coming hot queer actress is not happy with the quality of her emails. And obviously, these two have things to work out. Also, obviously, it's just a ruse for me to get to put two cute people together and have some shenanigans and making out. So it is actually the first adult romance that I wrote. It is my 7th or 8th book, which means my other ones were all YA. I love writing YA, love writing YA romance. But during the pandemic, I wanted to write other things. And I thought no one can find out because I'm home alone and the cats won't tell anyone. And so it was like, felt like a safe time to experiment in a new genre. And I sort of had this idea kicking around for a long time of someone who got like a list of reasons they were flawed from an ex, and it like made them feel cursed to like never fall in love again, because I was once given a list of reasons that I was a terrible person and it screwed you up. So I didn't run away.
I just want to talk to that person. So give me their name.
This is not, we were just, when we were off camera, we were talking about the Eras tour, and like with the Speak Now Taylor's version, Taylor Swift's like, hey, everyone, don't go all yell at John Mayer now. It was a really long time ago. That is how I feel. Like, it was a long time ago. People make mistakes. I'm sure if that person knew that they were going to screw me up that badly, they wouldn't have done it. But I wanted to get something out of that experience. I wanted to write about a character moving forward from feeling that way. And I kind of didn't know what the story was. And then I got a logistical email from a celebrity. And I was like, this is not real. I do not believe she sent this. Who wrote this email? And then because I'm a writer and I was bored at home during a pandemic, I was like, what if that was a book? What kind of person? I was like, oh, the same kind of person who ran away to the suburbs because of this toxic. So like, it all came together. I also just love giving queer characters their happily ever after. I love giving, Nina is fat, and I love giving fat characters their happily ever after. And it turned out to be, I think, like the most rewarding and joyful thing I did during the entire pandemic. So glad it was that instead of sourdough.
I love that description. So the book that I have coming out is It Happened One Christmas, but the book that came out this spring was called Gigi Listening. And it's the story of Gigi, who owns a bookstore in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And she loves romance. It's a romance only bookshop, but as we know, life doesn't always work out the way it does in romance novels. So it's tricky for her, for any guy that she meets online, to sort of live up to this expectation. But she's heard the voice of an audiobook narrator narrating a favorite book, and she sort of fell in love with that voice because she hears him as she's going to sleep, and that's a very intimate relationship when she's alone in the bookshop or in her apartment. But this guy actually is a tour guide in England. So he works on a bus tour for his parents, and so her friends surprise her to go and meet this guy, because instead of saying like, you're crazy, you have to stop believing like the what if of this guy, just go and find out. And I think it's that leap of faith that any of us actually do take in life when we think like, even online or across the room, and like, what if I go and talk to that person, or what if that person is the one? You have to take a chance. So she does, and she goes and takes a chance. So it's the story of what happens on a 10-day bus tour, hoping to meet this guy and see if like he really is the one for her.
That's such a great premise, because I think all of us who love romance also love audiobook. Many of us, the overlap between those who love romance and those who love audiobooks is very strong. And there are a couple narrator voices where I completely understand why you would get on a plane to go meet them. For a question for all three of you, what was the first spark that made you interested in writing romance? Was it a character ship you loved growing up? Was it a book? Was it playing with Barbies? By the way, if you haven't seen the movie, get yourself to a cinema. Fan fiction, a love story you wish existed, anything. And let's go Chantel, then Amy, then Courtney.
So I grew up and I always wanted to read about relationships. I just think like, that's the thing, no matter what else you love in life, we are looking for that connection to someone else. So I find a huge comfort in that. And I just love seeing how people navigate. So I think as early as like, I could recognize that without recognizing it. And I would say like, sort of that like realistic, just everyday life stories are the ones that I always gravitated towards. And so it never dawned on me that like, even I think when I started writing romance, that I was like writing romance. I'm just like writing people's lives, and why wouldn't they have a relationship in some way, even if it's a friendship or not even maybe necessarily always ending in a happy ever after. Not all my books are totally just like a romance story, but there's an element of that relationship in them. Just love that.
Amy, how about you?
Yeah, I think similar for me. It was always a thing I was like consuming and loving, but never like thinking that was like actively a thing I was consuming and loving. And then when I started writing YA, I was like, I write like family drama, contemporary realism. And then I would always just be the most excited about writing like meet cutes and kissing scenes and like, like the banter. And at a certain point, it was like, hey, self, I think you're doing something. Maybe explore this, maybe do it on purpose instead of like accidentally doing it. So I wrote a few YA rom-coms and I had a blast doing it, but I always sort of felt like I was like, oh, I want to like mix it up. What's different about this? And then at a certain point, I was like, you just love this. You don't have to do some weird like response to a rom-com. Just like, I think there's such a pressure in our society that it's like, well, are you a serious writer or are you a romance writer? And it's like, I'm both. I'm freaking both. And also, like, what about me is serious? Look at my background. It's chaotic and stuffed animals and a puppy's been jumping around half the time I'm talking. Like, why do I even think I want to be serious? I want to write romance. I love it. And so when I started reading, Jasmine Guillory actually was my like turning point of We're Good Friends. And this is not a brag. This is a brag. So I read Wedding Date when it was like, like a Word document that she was like, do you want to read this? And is it good? And I was like, oh my God, I remember texting her, I was like, Jasmine, this is a book. Because I was like, there's no way this book is not going to be published and be such a big hit. So that didn't make me think I could do it because it was so good. It just made me want to do it. That was a book that also was very modern, and it talked about like, not to sound like an after school special, but talked like social issues. And like, it wasn't like, it just felt so new and fresh. And I was like, I want to do this. So that really set me off.
Okay. Amy. I just did a podcast with called Thoughts on. I was a guest on a podcast and they asked me like, where did the romance genre come from? And I was like, well, it's been around for a long time, but it really started in 2018 when a woman named Jasmine Guillory, blah, 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 blah.
I think it's so true. I think, and it's, by the way, I want to make clear, people were doing the work before but there was something about her book coming out at a certain time, at a certain moment, and having so many things about it that I just felt like it turned a dial.
It absolutely did. The Houston Chronicle did a story about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it was also when a lot of publishers realized that trade paperback rather than mass market paperback, with the trade paperback romances would sell. I mean, those of us who have loved romance from the beginning, like when I was 13 and discovered the spinner racks at the Wayzata branch of the Hennepin County Library west of Minneapolis. I mean, I've been reading them since then. That's a long time. Dinosaurs were on the earth at that point. But you're right. People have been doing the work. They have been doing it through self-publishing, and there's a lot of amazing independently and self-published romance too. I'm glad that traditional publishers are doing it so we can sell them in our stores.
Yes.
All right, enough of that. Okay, Courtney.
Actually, mine kind of relates. So, well, and my agent calls it the rom-connaissance, which I love because, like, obviously the work has been here and the people have been doing it, but it was 2018 where there was this huge boom of, I don't know if it was something in society, it's just what we needed to devour. Who knows? But there was a big boom of it in publishing, and that is also the time where I found Helen Wong's The Kiss Quotient, which I believe came out around the same time. And I don't know, it was just absolutely incredible. I couldn't get enough of it. And I went to Helen in our Captain Hook group chat and was like, why didn't you tell me that this is what this was? Like, I have been, I think, looking my whole life for this experience in a book. And then it led to, Kate Claiborne and reading her whole backlist. And I couldn't get enough. And I never felt like, oh, well, I could write something like this until I had this idea that wouldn't let go, which was Morgan crashing into the tree farm. And here we are. But I think prior to that, it was like, this is so corny, but I've literally always been obsessed with the idea of love. Like the idea that whether it's a romantic partner or a friend or somebody that just is there and sees you for who you are and loves you unconditionally, and loves you through it. Like there's no other feeling in life like that. And I love stories that portray that and remind us that that's what we deserve out of relationships in our lives.
I love that. And I'm a huge Kate Claiborne fan. I'm so excited that Kensington is re-releasing the Lottery trilogy starting in November.
It's so good. That's what I started with. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. What things make writing joyful for all three of you? And what tools do you use to cope with lower points you might find in your writing, such as writer's block and rejection? And this time I'm going to go Courtney, Chantel, Amy.
I think what makes writing joyful for me is the community. I definitely wouldn't have kept going if it wasn't for my friends, and feeling like I finally found a place that I belong when I came into the writing community. I always sort of felt like that one meme character from Mean Girls that was like, I just have a lot of feelings. It's true. And I think it's like, well, maybe there's a reason you have a lot of feelings and you could finally just do something with that. And then I don't know. So the community and also doing things mixing things up for my brain, like trying new mediums or trying new forms or just being open to different kinds of, like, for example, I would love to write a graphic novel. I don't know how, but it would be very cool too. And so like that idea switches my brain on, like, ooh, let's try it. Like I had never written a romance novel and I was like, ooh, let's try it. And I like things with the structure. And then just getting excited about something and remembering why this is fun, which is because I love stories about love and people finding that. So yeah. And like, I think TV can also be a huge inspiration. And just being like, well, what needs to be more gay? Like what movie genre can I just make more gay? So that's really fun to do. And that's how I handle, keep going. My messy answer.
Excellent. How about you, Chantel?
So I think for me, like I feel like the writing is the thing that kind of makes me happy in life. And I have 2 stepkids and a son. So a lot of times things are very stressful. They're teenagers. And I'm just like, wow, being a teenager was so fun. But when you're the parent of it, it's like really not fun at all. And so I'm like, the writing is that piece that I'm just like, oh my God, I can just create this world where the problems that they have are still real problems, but they are like problems I can solve, right? And there's like, I can tell. So for me, that is like, it's almost like a therapy, which I really try to treat it as, because you never know how your book is going to do or be received or anything, right? So you have to love the writing. And I think it's the same way. I have one of those little free libraries on our front fence, and the message on it says like, you're never lonely if you have a book. And that's the way I feel. And so anytime it's frustrating, a scene that's frustrating, I just skip ahead to one that's going to like make me feel good. And usually I find that that scene that I was struggling with was not important anyways. And that's where I sort of make sure that I keep being inspired. And rewatching and rereading my favorite books and favorite movies.
Okay, so what are some of your go-tos?
So, what I was just recently rewatching, and I will like, even if I have to do like boring, like accounting things, I put it on, is Something Borrowed, because I think that movie is so perfect, right? Like that you could have felt, if it's based on the Emily Giffin book, which also I love, but that is a great example of like how you just treat every little detail can sway you, because we shouldn't be rooting for someone who is cheating, right? Like that is not the character we're supposed to root for. So I always think that's so well done, because it's the nuances that really work.
Absolutely. Amy, how about you?
Yeah, I also find a lot of joy in the community, but I also like, writing is hard, but when you get to the points that start to, it's like when the book starts to feel like it's writing itself, like you just have to sit down and show up, and it's like, the connections are happening, like you start knowing what the characters want to do without having to think about it. That's like the part to me it starts, and you find connections that you didn't mean to put in there, but like maybe your subconscious did. Feels so good. Or like when you're editing and you fix one thing and then like 3 things slot correctly suddenly. Oh my gosh, it just feels like magic. So, because like sometimes first drafting is just really hard, because especially once you're a published author, because you've gone from like doing like, like first pass pages of this beautiful formatted book that's like good and people have told you it's good and you feel like you're like, I'm an author, and then you've got this like Word document of garbage, and you just have to keep going, and you have to keep reminding yourself like, I can get there. So like that's when you can find the joy in a first draft, and when you can find the joy in revising, which is also very hard. It just feels so rewarding. And what do? I also I think it's important to do things that aren't writing. I also think it's important to do things that aren't screens, because like I love television a lot, and I love like being in my car and like listening to music and podcasts. And what I found is like when I'm struggling to like write or come up with a story or like make progress, stop listening to podcasts, which are like other people's voices and thoughts, and like listen to music where I can like daydream and have like big emotions and like let those sweep over me. That is where I can kind of often get back to it when I need to get back to it. Sometimes again, sometimes there's no stopping it. Like you give me 1 free minute in a busy room and I could write for a minute, but like sometimes it's harder.
I love that a lot. So writing romance is such a powerful thing. And I can't remember which one of the 3 of you mentioned it, but that sometimes it's looked down upon by it was you, Amy, by people look down upon genre fiction. They look down on children's fiction. And I'm the kid specialist and romance evangelist at the bookstore. So let me tell you, I will have none of that, because our job is to sell books. We are booksellers. We are not book judgers. You read whatever you want to read. Hopefully it's romance, because then I can talk to you about it and go like this all the time at the store. But you know what? You do you. Everybody just read what you want and take a step back. Stop criticizing. It's not worth it. Because I think, and sorry, I'm going on a mini rant here. I think people writing in romance today are doing very good work and showing us a variety of life experiences for a variety of people and reflecting the entirety of the human condition. And that is a wonderful thing. I'm done. All right. So, like I said, romance is a powerful thing. What do you think is the greatest effect that a romance novel can have on a reader? And what do you want your stories to leave your readers with? We're going to go Courtney, Chantel, Amy.
Oh, no, that's a big question. Okay, so I think the power of romance is that it can meet you wherever you are. And like there are so many times I'm reading a book and I don't expect it to hit me like it does. I was like, wait, this has an illustrated cover. This has a fun premise. Why am I crying? And I really love that power, and also the power of empathy that translates through romance, through sort of sharing those experiences with the character, whoever they may be, whoever you may be, whatever your life experience is, and the transformative power that has for society. And I hope that my romance novels leave people with the feeling that they are enough.
I love that. How about you, Chantel?
That was a great answer. Yeah, I would just like to say, like, even my mother-in-law is like the biggest supporter of me. She's always like, give me your book. I'll give you my feedback. I'm like, I have like 4 pages. She's like, I'm sure it's great. I will let you know what I think. And I was like, but then she says things like, well, what if I write a book that's like, real? And I'm like, oh, that was pretty real. Like real emotions, real feelings, right? Like, so I feel like there's just this idea, but I think that I've said it already, but like romance and relationships is the one universal thing we have in common, right? So like you could read a Western, but you're like, well, I've never like sat on a horse or like put on a cowboy hat, but like you suspend your disbelief of like how it is. So when people are often like, what I love about it is that like you can find yourself and feel like you've found a community and in a book and found people that you can relate to, or maybe not relate to, but you don't feel alone. Like all of those things, I think you're almost guaranteed because it's how people are interacting, and that's life, right? All the rest of it doesn't necessarily ever happen. Not to say like we can't love to read something that we don't know anything about. That's for sure a truth. But that's what I want to bring to people, like just make them feel like they are not alone.
I love that too. How about you, Amy?
I mean, so similar to what Chantel was saying, I think it's so weird that romance is held up as unrealistic when the core plots of most romances, especially these days, are like about like dating slash, you know, like romantic relationships, friendships, and the power and joy of those, family and work. I'm sorry, most of those things are in like literally everyone's lives. And also, if you talk to anyone in a good relationship, a good romantic relationship, their story is always so good. You know, like when you're like, oh, you two seem happy, how did you meet? And you start hearing the story about them in college, and then they met later, and it's always so, it's better and like usually weirder than anything I could put in a book. And I get so mad when I was like, oh, why do you want to read this unrealistic stuff? And I was like, oh yeah, like unlike thrillers where men with no skills solve everything. Like, what are we talking about? It makes me so mad. It's so sexist. And it just, I also think sometimes it's just fun that it's kind of, I don't know, we're like secretly in the corner, just like churning out really fun books about, like you said, the human condition. And yet like no one's paying us attention and we can just like get away with, it's just, I don't know. Sometimes I think there's a freedom in that. As far as like what I want people to take away from my books, I feel like it's usually pretty like, it's more like specific to the books themselves than like an overall, you know, besides everything I just said. I'm so sorry that my pets are being distracting. I put the puppy in here because I was afraid she'd be more destructive on the other side of the door, but there's always pet drama in my life. Like for consideration, it was really important to me to write from this place of when you cut yourself off because you fear that like you're, you know, I wrote this book before the song Anti-Hero came out, but like when you feel like you are the problem, it's you, and you think you can subtract yourself from other people's lives, like that is a mistake. And also like what you gain by letting people into your life, not just romantically, but like also with your friendships, also with like getting closer to people you work with, just like filling your life with strong bonds and relationships, like it powers everything and you deserve it. Like to me, it's like no matter like how low you think of yourself, like take a look at how other people see you. It's important too.
That's so good. And now I have the chorus from Anti-Hero in my head.
So sorry.
It's
so
not,
sorry.
you know what? It's not a bad thing.
It's not bad.
It's,
yeah. It's a great
you
song.
know, maybe it'll kick out Olivia Rodrigo's Vampire that's been in my head for 10 days. So if we can get that out, that would be great. I do have, another one popped in. I'm getting some questions from the audience. I'm going to kind of combine them. One is from Victoria and one is from Amanda, and they're talking about both the pressure of a sophomore slump and getting over the fear of writing your first novel. So I guess kind of dealing with, how do you deal with the fear and the pressure of starting, and then once you've done it, doing it again? Okay, so I'm going to go Chantel, Courtney, Amy.
So I think that sophomore slump, that's a real thing. I had that in my actual sophomore book, and then recently with Gigi Listening, which I thought there's some people from Canada. The book is called Two for the Road in Canada. I definitely felt that way also. But something I actually learned was with It Happened One Christmas that comes out, that was my editor saying like, do you want a Christmas romance? And I was like, okay. I thought it would be a year out, like regular publishing schedule. And she was like, we would need that in 2 months. And I was like, wow, like that's really fast. But then it was like, oh my gosh, I'm always complaining that publishing is so slow. And like, so I was like, no more complaints. And what that taught me was like, you better come up with an idea and figure it out and then start writing. And so I have totally forgotten the question. So first time. So I think my point was that I think I had no ability to doubt myself. I just thought, just write the story you want to tell. And I could not have those days where I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible, which I always do. Oh my gosh, this book is so terrible. Why don't I know how to write a book? I've written so many books. How come I don't know how to write a book? Like, I was just like, wrote the book. And I felt really good about it. And so I think I learned a lot from that. And I think going forward, that's what I'm going to do. It's just like, write. Like you're showing up at a day job every day. And like, you're not able to say to your boss, like, well, I don't know. I just think I'm so bad at my job. Like I'm going to go lay down. Like who could do that if they worked at Target? No.
Or Blue Willow Bookshop.
Yes. Right. So that's the lesson I learned. We'll see if it works on the next one.
That's awesome. Courtney, sophomore slump and starting for the first time.
Ooh, starting for the first time. Okay, so I remember reading this book by this guy named Stephen King, where he said, basically, it didn't help me at all. It was Stephen King on writing, and something he said got stuck in my head that made me never write for a very long time. And it was basically, if you can't sit down and write the book, then what I took from it was basically, this isn't for you. If you can't sit down and it doesn't flow out of your fingers and it's done, it's not for you. So I spent years being like, oh God, it's not coming together. That means this isn't the story. This isn't what I should be doing. So for my brain, figuring out what did work for me and finally freeing myself of that notion of, oh, this should come naturally. Story is a huge and wide breadth of a project that sometimes is very difficult to break down. And so I started with short stories, getting them bite-sized feelings of pacing and character and background and setting. And I really enjoyed those. And how I expanded was just to kind of build from there. And I worked with critique partners. And we're talking a decade. I wrote YA fantasy, and I rewrote a specific YA fantasy at least 5 times from the ground up. So first of all, no writing is ever wasted, because you learn, you don't even consciously know that you're learning, but with each new project you go into, you realize, oh, your brain can remember certain things of, oh, this is that feeling. And then you can start feeling things out intrinsically. Now I am kind of obsessed with this craft book called Story Genius by Lisa Cron. And she helps you build a blueprint for your character that almost feels like, when I came across this, it felt like cheating. And I was like, is this fair to use this? But something about it just fully clicked for my brain as far as having a structure. So kind of be open to trying new things in new ways. Also, this one, Romancing the Beat, it's a short little one. And it's so amazing and just condenses the romance novel down. As far as a sophomore slump, it was a huge struggle for me. I am not going to sugarcoat that. I had a terrible time for most of it, which is why celebrating this launch has been so powerful, because I've been able to finally be proud of what I've done. And I think having some distance but dealing with reviews for the first time, that you have to sometimes learn the hard way not to go on Goodreads or just lots of things. There are so many learning curves when this is new to you, and that's okay. That's all part of it. You're not gonna learn in like really any other way sometimes. But yeah, when I'm working on a new project, I doubt myself 100% of the time, and can't believe I finished 2 books. So I think that doubt and fear is always there, and sometimes you just have to learn how to write alongside it and accept that it's part of the process. And then that huge like feeling of triumph and victory is so rewarding at the end. And you can do it.
I love that. Amy, how about you?
First of all, I want to say I teach some writing workshops and I do some other like craft lectures. And one of the biggest piece of advice I often give is that if you get writing advice that makes you feel like you shouldn't be writing, or it makes you feel like you're doing things wrong, disregard it, burn that. I don't actually advocate to burn books, but like throw it away, like delete it from your Kindle. Like it's so, what is helpful. Like, I'm so happy for Stephen King that his books just flow out of him, and that's why he releases like 3 a year. Most of us don't do that, and that is great. I don't think most of us need to write 3 books a year, and Stephen King can calm down. So I would like to say to anyone who's ever read a piece of writing advice, including if it's from me, if it doesn't apply to you, or if it makes you feel like a worse writer, it's not for you. And I don't mean things that make you realize you haven't perfected your craft yet, you're still working. Like, sometimes I read something and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'm good enough yet, but like, that's on me to get better. That's like, versus like, if you do X, you're never a real writer. It's like, screw you. Yeah, you are. So writing used to be so easy for me when I was just like, like a person in her 20s who was like, I'm going to be a writer someday. I'm like sitting in a room with like, Microsoft Word. And I was so happy. And then once you're like a professional writer, it's really hard. The sophomore slump for me, in drastically unfair news, I had it with my YA career. I thought I did it. And then I had it again for my adult career, which feels so unfair. It is not my second book. It is like my millionth. And it was horrible. It was maybe worse because it felt like a different kind of pressure and I knew more. I'm sorry, Courtney, but luckily I knew that you were struggling in a similar way. And so I was like, just knowing that because we're the same publisher, and her schedule is like about 6 months ahead of mine, because my next book comes out in almost like just a little over 6 months. So 7 months ahead of me. So she had told me her issues, but I knew she got through it and she turned it in. So as I was struggling, I was like, Courtney struggled the same way and she's on the other side of it now. So that means, again, I'd also been on the other side of it. I turned in many books before, but I couldn't trust I felt like I couldn't trust my own self at that point. So I was like, you know what, Courtney got through it. And you know what, it didn't feel great for a lot of that book. And then when I reread it, I loved it. And that's another thing I've learned, is that the books that flow and the books that feel like you're just like slitting your arm and like draining the blood and you're just crying and wanting to barf, they come out the same in the end. I don't know why. It's weird. You'd think one would read like a horror novel and one would read beautifully. They read the same. So remind yourself too, if you're someone who's struggling with writing, just be like, hey, this feels like pulling my own teeth, but it's going to be fine.
I love that. And Amy, I would listen to you lecture about writing any day of the week. And also, Amy, okay, so you kind of cued into my second to the last question, which is, what is up next for you? If you can share any of that. So we're going to go Amy, Courtney, Chantel.
Oh, I was like, I won't be first, and I'll have a picture of my next book up by then. I'm finding it as I'm talking. My next book is called At Her Service. Oh, I did find it. Will this work? Ooh, look at that. It looks the same, but like blue and butcher. So it's in the same universe as For Her Consideration. If you liked that book and you liked the assistant character, Max, she is the main character. She is just a very thirsty 20 something, really wanting a promotion and a bartender girlfriend. And because she feels like her life is sort of like, I don't even want to say like going off the rails, like can't even find where the rails are to get started on them. And she agrees to take part in a campaign with her influencer roommate to let like an app give her life advice and follow it. And shenanigans ensue. But it's about, it's about being a Hollywood assistant. It's about being in your 20s and feeling like you should have grown up a lot more than you actually have. And I'm again just so happy and excited about it now. It comes out in February.
Courtney, how about you?
Well, I have read an early draft of Amy's amazing book, and I will say you are absolutely going to want to pre-order that. So it's absolutely incredible. And for me, so I am currently, I mean, just to be very open, I'm currently contract free, which I'm just kind of savoring for a minute. It's been a very busy time that I'm highly grateful for. But since 2020, it's been nonstop. And I don't mean that as like a humble brag. But I'm grateful to kind of take a step back and kind of assess all I've learned and put it into my next project, which I'm super excited about. I'm currently drafting a proposal package, and honestly, I'm just taking my time with it. With the second book, I think it was my first time working on a deadline, and so I had to get used to hurrying up. So this time I kind of want to, like, who am I as a writer now? And it's a fun genre mashup. Still very rom-com and highly romantic, and will probably be very sexy. So I'm very excited.
Yay, that's wonderful. And Chantel, how about when is It Happened One Christmas going to come out?
Well, Courtney, I love that, because that is, I just want to say that, like, it is so different when you're on the contract versus not. And so it's that I'm excited for you. Yes, It Happened One Christmas comes out on October 31st.
Yeah.
So it is this story. I wanted to set a holiday romance in Canada, because that's where I live. And so this is set in Quebec, which is where I'm from. So it has like all of the elements that I celebrate at Christmas. So we celebrate Le Réveillon, which is like Christmas Eve, and you stay up till midnight, and you have tourtière, which is like a meat pie, and you open one present, and you have all these festivities. And of course, there's like poutine, and they tap the maple trees to get maple syrup, and they eat it on snow. So there's like all these like traditions that I thought was really fun and Christmassy. And so it's this Hollywood director who wants to direct her own movie, like a Hallmark movie, and it takes place in Chelsea, Quebec, and she needs to secure the film permit for it. And so she goes there, and there's an ice storm. So if any of you know, like, those ice storms happen, and it's like basically you're just shut down. And so she's trapped, though, of course, with the sexy mayor / Christmas tree farm owner. Oh my gosh. What is going to happen?
And I have to say, I also have read It Happened One Christmas, and it is an absolute delight. So you are all in for a holiday treat.
I love that there's a tree farmer type romantic leads in both of your books. That's what a great thing to have in common.
Yes, I agree.
It's so fun.
Proud.
I have enjoyed.
Strong. I was sorry. I was like, you just want someone with strong forearms who can like take down a tree for you.
Yeah.
Fair. This has been such a great conversation. Thank you all for spending time in the audience and on screen with us. Anytime I get to talk romance, it makes me very happy. Before I ask my last question, I just want to remind everybody watching that Bookstore Romance Day is on Saturday, August 19th. So wherever you live, go find a bookstore and buy some romance books. It's like one of my favorite made-up holidays, so I'm super excited. The last question that we always ask is we ask authors to tell us a book of their heart. Doesn't have to be the book of their heart, but a book of their heart. Something that you love, whether you loved it as a child, whether you read it last week, whether it was just something meaningful in your life. So I'm going to go Chantel, then Amy, then Courtney.
So after somebody had read Gigi Listening and written to me on Instagram and like was telling me as they were reading it what they were feeling, and then said, like, did you ever read The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry? And I hadn't, although I'd heard of it. And she was like, you have to read this book. Like, I feel that you will love it. And so I read it, and like, oh my gosh, I loved it. So it's, you know, a bookstore owner And it was just like those books where you're laughing and crying. And I felt like, what a treasure that someone recommended it. And like, where was this book my whole life? And I just read it maybe a few weeks ago. So that's my recommendation.
That's one of my favorites. How about you, Amy?
First of all, I'm so excited to read this book because it has not been on my radar. And like my favorite, most recent-ish is Tomorrow and Tomorrow. So I'm just like, wait, she has books that I somehow have not read. So
Okay,
I really just like want to stop and read this book instead of talk.
Before you give your recommendation, have you read her YA?
Yes, that's the thing. I've read her YA and so I don't know how I missed this one, but I kind of love that there's a book by someone I really like.
Right.
I'm going to buy it the second this.
And did you read Young Jane Young?
No. Oh my God. Okay, great. This is so many purchases are happening.
You're welcome in advance, but now give your suggestion.
Mine is Station 11, which is, it's a very popular book. It's probably on everyone's radar. But the thing I love about it is that despite that it's a dystopian novel about a pandemic, it's really about like, what is the purpose of art when the world is basically over? And like, there's the line from it, survival is insufficient. It's like, we don't just need to get by. We need stories. We need escapism. We need things that like feel cathartic. And I think about that all the time because I think, especially maybe if you write things like romance and you watch the world literally sometimes burning around you and you think like, what am I doing? Should I be like putting on my app? No, like people still need storytelling. People still need stories. So I love that book so much. And the adaptation was freaking incredible, which how often can we say that? So also watch it. And my cat just joined.
Your pet game is on point.
I'm so embarrassed. They're such
No, it's awesome. Okay, Courtney, bring it home.
Okay, so A Story of My Heart is The Charm Offensive by Alison Cochrane. I adore just the queer representation in this book and the mental health representation. And I adore Alison. Alison has a beautiful heart and it's here on the page. And this book is just like a healing hug. Yeah. And Kathy, thank you so much for having us. You're incredible. We love Blue Willow Bookshop. Thank you for all that you do.
Well, it is our pleasure to host you. I can't wait because I know one day all three of you will come to Houston and it will be a delight to welcome you to the store. We really look forward to doing that. And everybody who joined us, thank you so much. I will send out an email to everybody who registered for the webinar with a list of all the recommendations. And I hope you're well, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you all for joining us. Bye.